welcome to my channel, Crafty Gal Confessions. I am Danny Dunn, and today I'm going to be showing you my process for setting up my stock tank pool for my third season. I get the most DMs about my liner and how I get it to look so seamless, so I'm going to have a heavy focus on that in this video as I'm putting in a brand new liner this year. I also have a new Intex Waterfall fountain I'm installing and a few other details to show you as well. First up on the agenda, clean up this massive mess. Our yard is super wooded, so every year we're left with a ton of sticks and leaves. We've got to get all that cleaned out before we can really get going on this. My husband, Mike, is the designated leaf blower operator, so big thanks to him for helping me out with that every year. Here are all the supplies listed out for completing my stock tank setup on this day. I did think of a few other things that I personally use and also think are necessary, but some of this you may find is or is not necessary, and I will cover all that throughout the video. Here is my new Intex Waterfall fountain I'll be installing for the first time this year, as well as some tubing that'll give me extra length than what the kit comes with. I did need extra space just due to our setup, and this was the longest tube I could find that worked with the Intex system, coming in at a little over 9 feet. I do just quickly want to explain a little bit about how this fountain works in case you are on the fence about installing it as well. Basically, this fountain is replacing your inlet valve. What I mean by that is it's replacing the valve that is returning water back into your pool from your pump. It has a toggle switch that's installed on the outside of the tank, and when you toggle it from one way to the other, it will redirect the flow of water from your valve to your fountain. This is important to know because this means that the fountain will only run when the pump is running. Here you see that I have gone ahead and laid out my foam underlayment. This is one of those supplies I noted that you may or may not find as necessary. This piece was left over from a flooring job we did in our basement, so I had easy access to this with no cost at all. There are alternative options that you could explore if you would like some sort of cushion between your liner and your metal, but it's not necessary. Now I am trying to get my liner pulled over the edge of the tank. You can see that I'm using my 3/4 inch snap clamps that are helping me hold it in place since I'm doing this by myself. This was one of those supplies I noted you may find as necessary or not. I like having them. It helps with the install of a liner. I also keep them tucked underneath my pool noodles and holding the liner in place. But it's not 100% necessary that you need these, especially if you've got an extra pair of hands when you're installing the liner. I also want to note that you should pay attention to the size that is needed. I have noted 3/4 inch because that is the size that I have for my Hastings tank. Now that I've got that fully fitted over the edge, I've gone ahead and removed all my snap clamps, and I'm attempting to slide the walls of the liner down, matching the seam of the bottom of the liner up with the seam of the bottom of the tank. I'll cut that excess off later, but for now I just want it as close to in place as we can get it before we start filling. This photo shows all the components included for your outlet valve. I do believe this is the valve that is included with your Intex pump, and you do not have to purchase this separately. The outlet valve is going to suck water out of your tank and send it to your pump. I can't show you my hole cutting process as it's already done, but just to explain a little bit, you do cut one hole just a couple inches up from the bottom of your tank, and then another hole a couple inches up and over from that one. This is the valve that is placed in your bottom hole. Now I am beginning to locate my existing holes to find exactly where they fall on the liner, paying close attention to making sure the liner is pulled fairly tight in the area. So I'm reaching my arm over the backside, finding where the hole is and trying to find the center of that hole so I can poke a little spot with my scissors into the liner. Once I've got that hole started, I then cut a little X that is almost the same size as the circle. I don't go the complete size of the circle, just almost maybe a centimeter or two smaller in the shape of that X. I am applying 100% silicone caulking directly to the gasket of the valve before I place it into the hole. The first time I ever did this, I was previously advised that I would not need any silicone caulking, that the gaskets would be sufficient for this project. But when I did do my water test on it, it was leaking and I ended up having to use that silicone caulking. So now I just go ahead and do it every year. Now you can see that I have poked my outlet valve through my X-shaped cut and am now firmly holding that in place while I screw on the attachment from the other side. Just hand tight for this should be sufficient. Once that's done, I just clean up my silicone caulking. Here's the end result and a photo from the outside. Be sure to give your silicone caulking at least 30 minutes drying time per the instructions on the tube. Once you've done that, you can begin filling your tank with water. As you can see, this is when I begin to remove all the wrinkles from the bottom of the liner. I'm doing this by pulling at the sides and smoothing and pushing with my feet on the bottom. You do not want to wait until your tank is full to try to do this. Those wrinkles will be impossible to get out once it's full. As you can see, this is a bit of a tedious process, so while you watch me do that, I'm just going to give you a couple quick tips to take into account before you start anything. First, make sure your tank is exactly where you want it to be before you put any water in it. The last thing you want to do is realize after there's a couple 100 pounds of water in it that you need to move it or make any adjustments. In addition to that, it is a lot easier to manipulate your liner if it has heated up in the sun ahead of time. If your tank is directly in the sun while you're doing this install, then you probably can disregard this tip. But if not, set it out in the sun for at least half an hour before you start installing it. It'll make it a lot easier to work with. This photo shows all the components included for your inlet valve. Your inlet valve is what's returning water back into the pool from your pump. This is installed in the upper hole that you've cut in the side of your tank, and it's not included with your Intex pump, so you will have to purchase it separately. You'll see in the second photo I've swapped out the piece that is installed on the outside of the tank. This piece comes with the fountain kit and will only be used if you are installing a fountain. You can see this piece has a toggle switch on it that will redirect the flow of water from the inlet to the fountain. As you can see, I have stopped filling the tank just as the water has almost reached the hole where I will be installing the second valve. If you're wondering why I installed these separately and didn't just do them both at the same time, let them dry, and then fill it, the reason is to reduce wrinkling. The weight of the water in the bottom of the liner allows you to remove or reduce any wrinkling that is occurring between the two valves during that transition. I'm repeating the exact same process that I did with the first valve, cutting the X, applying silicone to my gasket, poking it through, and hand tightening from the other side. On this one, I did realize I had some gaps, so I'm going ahead and filling that with silicone caulking and cleaning it up at the end. And here's how that toggle switch looks from the outside. While I'm waiting on the silicone caulking of my upper valve to dry, I'm going ahead and figuring out all the logistics of my fountain. I wasn't really sure when I purchased this thing how easy it would be to install, but let me tell you, this thing was so easy. One hurdle I do want to elaborate on, though, was the clamping system of the fountain. Even at its tightest setting, I could not get a firm grip on the edge of the tank. What I ended up doing is going ahead and putting down a pool noodle and then clamping over the top of that. That gave me just enough extra thickness that I could get a firm grip on it. But I do just want to note this because I know that not everybody wants pool noodles on the edge of their tank. And if you do not want that, then you'll definitely have to come up with an alternative solution. Be sure that you have fully read your manual and you are confident that you have made all the attachments for your pump correctly. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and finish filling your tank. Once the level has surpassed your upper valve, check the outside and make sure you don't see any leaking happening. As long as you're good there, you can go ahead and just start pulling your liner tight and placing all your snap clamps holding it in place. Once I've finished that, I then go around and trim off excess liner, leaving just enough overlap that it will tuck underneath my pool noodles. Now that my tank is almost full, my liner's in place, and there's very minimal wrinkles, I'm going to go ahead and start cutting the slits in my pool noodles to place those over the edge. For this, I'm just using a regular box cutter and trying to keep my cuts as straight as possible, but it does not have to be perfect. Any imperfections will not be noticeable once they're clipped over the edge. It does take 6 and a smidge of these noodles to wrap the entire perimeter of my tank. So in order to fill that little gap that's left at the end, I did have to purchase another pack of these, but that's okay because I will use them next year. Once your water line has surpassed your upper outlet valve, you can go ahead and toggle the switches on your valves open, bleed your water line, and turn on your pump. Make sure that you fully read your manual and you understand what I mean by bleed. This is all detailed out in the manual and is essential for your pump working properly. And now the reveal of this year's stock tank setup. I've got a full tank, a working pump, a brand new swan float to feature for this year. We just need a quick cleanup, a few final details, and we are ready to enjoy it for the summer. Back when we first created this space, I was about 7 months pregnant with my daughter. I envisioned a beautiful little Pinterest-worthy oasis where our family, but especially my future daughter, could enjoy every summer. There was a steep learning curve with this one and a lot of work went into it, but now that she's a toddler and I get to see my vision come to reality, it brings me so much joy, y'all. So if you are wondering if all this work was worth it, it totally was.